This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete.
So grab yourself something strong to drink. It could be coffee. It could be something else.
It could be something It could be something in coffee.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a meme where they were putting Baileys in cereal instead of milk.
My goodness, I meant like cream and sugar, Marianne. Where are your thoughts right now? I'm shocked.
On Baileys. And with that,
Yes.
thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and I. In the first half, we have a recipe of the week. Second half, we're going to talk about caregivers' grief. And in our third, Charlie's going to talk about self-care. And I had to kind of convince him it wasn't the self-care that he was thinking of.
Oh, well, there's always the next episode.
Yeah, in your dreams.
And there's always in my dreams, too. Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah. There's a name for that, right?
Yes.
Charlie's blushing. Charlie's blushing. So the first thing, Charlie, a mother does when she gives birth to her baby, once she stops screaming and crying, is to feed her child. To nurse her child is the term, right? Nursing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And food for many of us is, I know particularly for myself, is sort of a very comforting thing. So in honor of nurses everywhere, we're going to offer a nurse. We're going to offer a recipe.
Really? Let's see here.
I know, I am so generous. No, we're going to offer a recipe that's from a website that's run by a nurse for the ultimate in comfort food. So, Charlie, what is that going to be?
Well, I love a good cheeseburger, and meatloaf is a comfort dish for me. So when you pair the two together, I'm not sure what that would be, some sort of abomination, kind of like Frankenstein's monster, maybe. But I don't know. But when you pair the two together, it'd
be like a stuffed hamburger. You've never had a stuffed cheese hamburger where they put the cheese inside?
Wow, it's been a while.
And was it an abomination?
Abomination? No, that wasn't an abomination. No. But, God, I forgot it's stuffed. I forgot about those stuffed cheeseburger.
Yeah.
So, when you
were saying?
So when you pair the two together, you know that it's going to be good eating. I then decided, why not stuff it? Oh, sorry. With creamy mashed potatoes, up to the level of greatness. I always grew up eating meatloaf and mashed potatoes. Yeah. If it was like you couldn't eat meatloaf without mashed potatoes. This is a one-pot dish.
That's true.
What? Yes. This is
true.
A one-pot dish that you can have ready and served up on your table in 35 minutes. Of course, if you...
How's that possible?
I don't know, but if you put it in the microwave, you can have the thing in 6 minutes. In 35 minutes, the Instant Pot... Oh, sorry, next sentence. Dramatically drops down the cook time of this dish. Traditional meatloaf can take over an hour to cook.
Do you have an Instant Pot?
What kind of pot?
An Instant Pot? Do you have one of those?
I do not. I got a guy on speed dial I can call for. It takes me about 20 minutes to get to the house. But no, I do not. Do you?
No, but it's like all the rage with the young'uns.
Now, Instant Pot, is that the same as a crock pot?
Well, it's like if you took a crock pot and put it on like crack. So it's like if you crossed a crock pot with a pressure cooker, you'd get an Instapot.
Oh, these kids nowadays with their newfangled inventions. Okay, no, I was not familiar with that.
I know. No.
All right.
Well, we'll find out.
Okay.
So, I didn't know that meatloaf had such a storied history.
Absolutely. Listen, originally Meatloaf was known as Michael Lee a Day, and he had his biggest hit with Bat Out of Hell. And after that, followed by the very cleverly titled Bat Out of Hell 2. And then, of course, to put the trilogy together, Bat Out of Hell 3. But listen, you can call it, Huey, Dewey, and Louie. But this man pulled in, over 50 million copies of this bad boy. And you know what? And let's not forget his performance in the Rocky Horror Picture Show when Meatloaf.
What are we going to have for dinner?
Yeah, exactly. Meatloaf. And Meatloaf was literally the main course. Yeah, cool.
We've referred to Rocky Horror Picture Show more times than we probably ever should have.
Really?
Well, over the last year.
Well,
it's
you're
like,
right, over the last year. Yeah.
Who refers to Rocky Horror Picture Show but us?
Yeah. So, when it says things you might know about Meatloaf, it's about real Meatloaf. I guess I should start attending staff meetings a little more often, right?
Or we could start having them.
Or just even to have them, yes. All right, well then,
yes.
Well then here, let's get back to the program, folks. So, 4 things you may not know about Meatloaf, and not the entertainer. We don't want any wise guys out there. So, how Germans made meatloaf. I can see a problem right here, coming from the Germans. Meatloaf has been around for such a long time, and the Germans would put boiled eggs inside the meatloaf when they served it up. Do you know why, Marianne?
No.
It's not a rhetorical question. I have no idea either. Now.
Well, I wonder if they chopped them or if they just put boiled eggs so that when you slice the meatloaf, you get slices of boiled egg. Either way, I don't like boiled eggs.
I'm not a
that's
fan
never
of boiled eggs either. So, okay, so we can scratch out number 1. 2.
Well, for us, yeah.
Stretch meat. Sorry. You see what you started? Stretch meat during... secondly, to stretch meat during the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, you could find many homes serving up meatloaf. It was one great way that could stretch the meat. Really, who wrote this? You did this on purpose, didn't you, you son of a bitch? So I got to read it. Oh, dear. Your grandchild's not around listening to me speak this way, is he?
Oh, no.
Okay. So, yes, it was, and this line keeps repeating, it was one great way that could stretch the meat. They would use fillers like breadcrumbs, oats, or other starches to help make the meat serve more.
My mom always did this.
What?
And I had no idea. Stretch the meat.
Okay, fine. Go on.
No, I had no idea that, like it would be even possible or feasible to make a meatloaf that wasn't like full of
stuff.
Either like oatmeal or sometimes she'd use like pieces of bread or
filler,
whatever.
Yeah, filler stuff. Filler stuff. I remember.
I had no idea why she was doing that. Because it was, not the Depression anymore. It was the 50s and 60s, and she was still stretching the meat.
I guess things... I guess things just get ingrained, and you never let them go. And the Depression was such a fearful time. I guess some people just could not let it go.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's our psychology/history lesson for the day. Next, minced meat. Minced meat. Before a meat grinder was invented, they would use minced meat to create meatloaf. It was a process to get the meat small enough to form into meatloaf. But when the grinder came out, it was a game changer. Now, so where does Spam fit into all this?
Well, Spam's not meat.
Spam. What does Spam stand for? I forgot. It's an acronym for something familiar, something peculiar. So something peculiar Um,
I don't know.
M.
It was
Yes.
like it's a ration thing.
Yeah.
But I can remember my mom pulling out this huge meat grinder in
Mhm.
order to make, like
Spam.
she'd make nut bread and would have to like grind the walnuts by hand in order to do it, or like if she was going to make potato pancakes, she'd have to grind the potatoes. I guess by the time I never saw her, I'm trying to think, I never saw her grind up meat. So maybe they must have had hamburger by then.
I remember as a little kid
we're-
seeing people grind meat, but I mean, like little kid. Yeah.
Well, you are older than I, so.
Yes. I am? Oh, yes, I am. Yes. Number 4, sandwich time. Sandwich time. Is it the same as hammer time? Da 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 da. Can't touch it. Da da da. So sandwich time. Sandwich time. Many people love to take leftover meatloaf and serve it up the next day cold, in between 2 pieces of bread to make a sandwich.
I love meatloaf sandwiches. I love them. It has pumpernickel bread, yellow mustard, and dill pickles. Love them.
I never cared for it as a sandwich. I always like, meatloaf, mashed potatoes. Very good. Yes. So, somewhere in here, there are recipes for what I tried to describe. So please go to everyonedies.org. That's dies.org for a link for the recipe and additional resources for this program. We appreciate your questions and anything else you want to tell us. Send us monetary what? No, sorry. Just send us.
You
send
always
us.
devolve to that.
I know. I always do. It's the times we live in. And listen, anything else you want to tell us, like me not rambling on about this, you can email us at mail@everyonedies.org. Or please join our Facebook group, Everyone Dies. Now, this time you have to spell out the entire word, Everyone Dies. And please remember to rate and review this podcast. Marianne?
So, before I go on to the second half, why is your picture gone? I can't see you anymore. I have a triangle with a exclamation point.
Oh, I'm looking at the screen. I see what I usually see, you and me. I don't... Did it just...
Let me try plugging it in, because maybe it's feeling like it needs a juice invasion or something. That's the only thing I can think
Have I
of.
not been on throughout?
You were in the beginning, and then it didn't. But I'm thinking maybe because my battery was getting low, it's kind of gone into that, life-saving mode, All right. So in our second half, Charlie, I'm going to be talking about caregivers' grief. And our podcast is not written or meant for healthcare professionals. I certainly encourage them to listen to our programs and to share them with their patients. But, they're written for, the general lay public. But it's came to me that I think that we really need to talk about caregivers' grief.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes.
Coronavirus has gone on for so long.
Yep. Yeah.
And the caregivers, the professional caregivers, are wildly impacted by this disease that just does not want to stop. And also, you other caregivers.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that. Yes. Yeah.
Taking care of people at home. I mean, being a caregiver at home is very isolating. Being a caregiver at home in the age of coronavirus is even more isolating.
Yes.
So that's what I'm going to kind of talk about today. So in caring for dying or for bereaved individuals, we are subject to experience sort of a grief response of our own. You can't every day see people who are dying and care for their family members and not have a grief response of your own. Whenever we invest ourselves emotionally, we are going to need to have a grief response. You would have to be a robot or something in order to day after day after day take care of people who are at the end of their lives and dying and not have some sort of response. So a nurse's work transcends usual social boundaries. People let nurses in. We've been, I don't know how many years, 10 years in a row, the most trusted profession. When people vote about, like who you're going to trust, nurses are number one. We are with people throughout their most vulnerable times of their lives. We hold their hands when they give birth and take care of them as they're going through that process, and hold their hands and go through them in the process of leaving this life and everything in between. I can remember years ago that, my husband and I would go places and people would just start telling me things. Just a wide range of things. And he would say, why do they always tell you stuff? And I just would kind of laugh and say, I've got that kind of face that says, tell me about the boils. Or the other thing that I knew I'd be in trouble, they'd say, oh, you're a nurse, you're going to love this. And I had one guy actually pull down his pants and show me the boil on his ass.
Wow.
So, yeah. So for those of you listening, don't do that to a nurse. And for the nurses in the group, you're probably thinking, yeah, that might have been cool. Anyway, so we see a lot. We hear a lot. People, by nature of our profession, tell us stuff. And we're the caring profession. We take care of people. Now, everyone who's listening knows that they know that's what we do. We take care of people. But I would guess that you probably don't spend too much time thinking about, well, who takes care of the nurse? What do we need to do to be sure that the nurse is okay? Now, throughout my career, people would, bring donuts or flowers or things, to the nursing unit and give them to us as, we're so appreciative of you. We couldn't have gone through this without you, those kinds of things. And those are wonderful ways of showing appreciation. But there's also the everyday kind of thing, but before you leave, or even just in terms of behaviors, things like, without getting political at all, but, vaccinations, face masks, staying 6 feet apart, things like that, so that in this case, the virus can maybe get some control, and the nurses who are taking care of everybody can not feel like there's this tremendous weight that's sitting upon them. I can remember once going to the post office. I had a package, and I stapled the bubble package, and took it to the post office, and the postmaster said, like in really kind of a very irritable tone, "Don't you care if we get hurt? These staples can hurt us." And I thought, I was mortified. I was like, well, of course I care if people get hurt. It never occurred to me that somebody would get their finger caught in a staple. I mean, would I've done it if I knew that? Of course not. I was in my 20s. I just never thought of it.
Yeah, you wouldn't think
never
of it. Yeah,
considered it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes with nurses and with the decisions that we make, we're like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and that we don't necessarily think about what effect is this going to have on other people? It's like you never consider that there's this whole profession that is under tremendous pressure and tremendous need. You guys have heard me talk about my daughter who's a nurse and who's working in a hospital now, and even on her days off, they'll call and they'll say, "We're short-staffed. Can you come in?" And she's exhausted because she's gotten COVID at work. She's, working 12-hour shifts at night, and she needs to sleep. But if and when she says, "No, I can't come in," then she feels extremely guilty because she's leaving her other professional nurses that she works with short-staffed. So even on your day off, you can't just rest your head and say, it's okay that, I'm laying on the couch for the day, because you might be laying on the couch, but if you've been called, you are feeling guilty in the process of it. So the factors that influence how a nurse adapts or how we move through is one of the factors is professional education. And in the past, healthcare professionals were often told to control your emotions, to emotionally distance yourself from patients and families. Patients and families at the end of life require intense interpersonal involvement and compassionate care. When I went to nursing school, we were taught you don't even sit on a patient's bed. You find a chair and you can pull up to the bed, but you would never ever sit next to a patient if the need was to comfort them or whatever. And so verbalizing feelings and expressing emotions would help the nurse process grief and loss and provide quality care at the end of life. But how does that happen? Where does that happen? And do nurses have time for that to happen? And the reality of the situation is that you can offer lots of these kinds of resources to nurses, and generally the answer you're going to hear is, I don't have time to do that. Nurses are frequently, working their full-time job, might be married, might have a few kids. A lot of them are working on either bachelor's or their master's in nursing. They're like, I'm working to get every minute out of my day. I don't have time to sit and think about that patient that just died in my arms. I have to move on to that next patient who is dying in my arms. And that grief accumulates.
Right.
I worked as a hospice nurse. I was in palliative care. People died under my care, with my care, not because of my care,
right.
Let's be clear, daily. And, but yet, I still had to go home to 2 kids and, all that went with that.
Right.
So think about that. Just those of you who are listening, just think about that and do what you can in terms of your own personal behaviors that might make that easier. Then there's this idea of a personal death history. And you've heard Charlie and I talk about, who's the first person you saw, or different things that we've seen in our own life that kind of influence how we see death now. So past experience with death on a personal and professional level, the possible unresolved grief issues can influence the professional's ability to cope with and caring for dying people. And that's true for caregivers. Those of you who are at home caring for people, whatever experiences you've had with death are going to affect how you see that death coming. And so, and we've had, we have people get mad at us for our name. Everyone dies. I don't want to hear that. They'll write me notes. I don't want to hear that. That's too depressing. It's like, it's like, I know you don't want to hear it, but honestly, you need to hear it because it's a fact and it'll happen and you won't be prepared and your family won't be prepared and it could not go all that well.
Right.
And I've seen enough death not go all that well that I don't want it to happen to you.
Nope.
And so educate yourself, do, kind of some of the things that need to be done so that that's not your story and that's not your your history. It's not what's going to happen to you. Life changes. We're all going through life changes, and they can include death in the family, caring for elder parents, separation from loved ones, kids leaving home, divorce, illness. I mean, the list goes on and on, a pandemic. And all of those changes can signify losses. They can trigger a grief response. They can make it difficult for us to be able to cope with caring for the dying patient and their families. I remember having a nursing student who was assigned to take care, I had assigned her to take care of this elder man. And she came and she said, Dr. Matzo, I can't. He's like my grandfather. I remember when I was 10 and my grandfather died, and he reminds me of my grandfather. And I said, so when you were 10, who took care of your grandfather? And she said, well, the nurses did, and that's what made me want to be a nurse. I said, right. I said, we take care of generations, and before that, somebody took care of the people that we love. And after us, somebody's going to come along and take care of us. And so you now have the opportunity to go in and give the care that you, as a 10-year-old, wanted to give to your grandfather, but because you were 10 and you weren't able to, a different nurse did it. But now you're the nurse, and you have this wonderful gift to go and do that and heal your grief, and also to help him have a good death. And so that's another thing that we never even considered, is this generational, that there's all, that there have been nurses and that they have done what we couldn't when we were young, and they'll take care of us when we are old, when we can't for ourselves. But in this middle time while we're working, we are doing it. And recently, I was in the hospital. I had an infection, and the nurse who took care of me came in with a little thing of lip balm. And she said, here, this is for you. I said, it's for me? She said, yeah. She said, us nurses have to take care of each other. And I thought, you're right. We do. We're kind of a sisterhood. When, we're not picking at each other and, some other things. We do take care of each other, Not everybody got a lip balm that day, I know. But she made sure, that for whatever reason, she brought that to me. Last aspect of this is our support system. The presence or absence of support systems can influence our ability to move through our stages of adaptation. And emotional support can come from peers, it can come from family, it can come from coworkers, our teachers, all of which can help increase our capacity to adapt to and cope to in terms of caring for people who are at the end of life. It's very profound to be with somebody who's facing the end of life. It's very profound to sit with that family and hold a family meeting as you talk about, what are we going to do now? And how are we going to get there? And the needs of the family at that time, and the dynamics of the family. And you're brought right into that with them, but still needing to, for them to help to process what's going on, make decisions. It's extremely hard work, but so fulfilling and so necessary. Grief, when it's permitted, when we give ourselves time to actually feel grief, helps to process the pain of loss and allows for the pain to heal. And as I've said, if you talk about, well, let's process the pain of your loss to a nurse, they're going to laugh at you and say, I don't got time for that. I have like 6 other patients I have to go deal with. I will think about that later. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. So how can you help? So if a nurse says, oh my God, this is so overwhelming, there's some ways you can respond. You can say, you feel overwhelmed. What that's doing is naming what they just said, sort of reflecting that back.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you say things and you wonder, did anybody just hear that, whatever it is that you said?
Yeah.
And because if somebody doesn't reflect it back, you think, okay, nobody's paying any attention to me. Understanding is needed. Saying there's so much going on. How can I help you? Sometimes, hey, would you just get me ice water or Diet Coke or something would make a phenomenal difference. I don't know how well people know nurses, but when we go to work, we don't tend to eat, we don't tend to drink, and we don't tend to go to the bathroom. We are well known for developing bladders of a camel. Why? Because we just don't have time to stop and do those things. Or we don't say, like people who say, well, it's my break time, like in other professions. I always kind of laugh on the inside and think, I wonder what that's like to go take a break when you're at work.
Yeah, you have a scheduled break and you're going to take it at that time. Right, yeah.
Or a lunch break or any kind of break. It's like, you bring food generally, if you have time to prep it and bring it, you bring things that you can, pick at or kind of munch on while you're charting. But to actually go to the cafeteria and have a meal, I worked, 44 years? I never did that. I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Because my goal, especially after once I had kids, was I needed to be done out of work. I couldn't be staying there another 2 hours charting to pick up my kids from school or do whatever.
Right.
I had to work through in order to get out semi-close to the time that was time to go, as long, the period I was being paid for, because I had other responsibilities, as a mom and stuff after work. Respect is another thing that's very important. Saying I'm really impressed with how well you're handling everything. Let them know that you respect what they're doing in this situation. It goes a long way in terms of thinking, thank you. Thank you. Like maybe even gives that nurse or that caregiver that opportunity to just take a breath and say thank you. And these, like I said, these go for the caregivers in the home. I mean, if you're in the home and you're taking care of your husband with Alzheimer's or, whatever the situation is, it'd be really nice for people to say that they really respect what you're doing. Support, saying things that, I'm going to be here with you and, I'll help you, and not that statement of, hey, if you ever need anything, just let me know. Because nurses and caregivers are not going to let you know. We're just not going to take the time to do it. So stepping in and saying, hey, can I, do, I don't know, weed your garden or whatever. That means a lot. Or, talk to them. What's the hardest part of that? I've people who've been on the ventilators and are going to be released, taken off those ventilators. In my job in palliative care, I've done that many, many times. And so it's a hard thing to do, to pull that tube out of somebody's mouth or out of their throat, have them be comfortable and to be present with them as their body goes through that. And some people, are able to stay alive for, a few hours. Some people will die within 20 minutes, but that's hard. That's hard to do. It's necessary.
Yeah.
It's necessary. It'd be better if they hadn't been put on the ventilator in the first place, which is what an advance directive can help to do. But that's hard to do. And so those kinds of open-ended questions are really important. Grief will affect individuals differently, and it can be exhibited through signs and symptoms such as changes in our immune responses, distress, anger, sleep disturbances, withdrawing from people, pain, panic, suffering. So encourage people who are in those caregiving roles to remember to take care of their own health. Remember to, remind them or help them to have access to good food and hydration. Encourage adequate sleep and hygiene. There's resources to help them to adjust and to help them with their grieving process. It could be the chaplain services or clergy or spiritual support, psychological referrals, individual therapy, group therapy, community peer support. All of those things are available. And quite frequently, nurses are going to tell you that they're too busy. They're too busy to go to those things because all of those things take a lot of work and a lot of emotional energy. And sometimes we need all of our energy to put one foot in front of the other. So, the nurse can have what's called complicated grieving, and you should listen to that podcast about complicated grieving, where signs and symptoms of complicated grief are intense sorrow, pain, thinking about the loss, the inability to focus on anything other than the loss itself, intense, persistent longing or pining for the deceased, difficulty accepting the death, numbness or detachment, bitterness about the loss, feeling that life holds no meaning or purpose, lack of trust in others, inability to enjoy life or even remember any positive experiences of, someone who's died, and having trouble carrying out normal routines. So those are signs and symptoms of complicated grief. And the nurse has a lot of complicated grieving that they do because they are seeing death, like I said, one after another after another.
Did you say this is a podcast?
What?
Did you say
yeah, we
that
did
this is... Oh, our
we did
podcast.
A podcast
I'm
about
sorry,
this.
our podcast. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about something like a outside.
Is there any other podcast?
No, of course not. No, that's it. This is it. This is the only podcast. Yes.
The only podcast. And so, encouraging nurses to use the resources that are available is important, but I will tell you that that's a real hard sell. So, it's okay to think to yourself, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to help people, who are grieving in this way, or nurses who are, just flooded with very, very sick people with this virus. But you can acknowledge that by saying, I wish I had the right words, but I just want you to know that I care. You can say, I'm sorry for your loss, but that, can become kind of trite sounding after a while, even though, it's true. I say that all the time. Yeah. I am sorry. I wish you didn't have to go through that. I wish my sisters in nursing or brothers in nursing didn't have to go through that, but we do. It's the nature of where we are. I wish a lot of things. I wish people would get vaccinated. I wish people would wear a mask, but I can't control any of that. I want to know that. I want you to know that I care, and I'm sorry you have to go through this. It's important to understand that not everyone experiences feelings the same. So it's not appropriate to say, I know how you feel.
Oh, hell no. No.
There
yeah.
is, no way that you know how I feel. Even if you were in my shoes for, a month, you don't have, we talked about all those things that lead to us in terms of how we respond.
And it seems like you said, people respond to grief in different ways. So even if both, people have, suffered a loss, I mean, people handle it in different ways. So even something like that, you've experienced it, but You've experienced it differently. You can't always say, no, I know exactly how you feel. My spouse also died. Yeah, because people handle it in different ways. Yeah.
So you could say, though, I don't know how you feel, but I'm here to help you in any way I can. You could buy him a coffee or a candy bar or just offer
Meatloaf.
to listen. Meatloaf and not the man. So, as palliative care practitioners, what we need to do is overcome sort of I think we might have talked about reciprocal suffering in the past, in other podcasts that, I suffer and then you're suffering and then your suffering comes back to me as patients and caregivers, and move towards sort of actualization of our human potential, being as good of people, as caring of people as we can be. Wearing, and I don't want to harp on wearing a mask, but it seems like the simplest one to mention. Wearing a mask helps you share that suffering with other people and can help bring down the rate of transmission so that, nurses could have their day off without, the unit being overloaded and being called to come in. So there's that commitment to care for ourselves, to care for others, and to be concerned about, the staples you put in the package. I'll tell you, that was 40 years ago, and I still put staples in my package, but over that, I put packing tape so nobody will get hurt. Learning to care for the dying is like learning to love. The central concept is that the more we give of ourselves, the more we receive. Remember those moments of love when you're caring for your patients. And, the memory of those moments helps us maintain our commitment to the art and science of nursing. And, and not leave. I mean, that's one of the issues that happens within nursing is that people can get extremely burnt out and they'll go do something else.
Right.
And we have a nursing shortage. We cannot afford for that to happen. So, I've been kind of talking about self-care, and in our resource list, I've given you a variety of different resources for some cool journals and things like that are out. There's an article about how to take a walk, and Charlie's going to kind of go through some thoughts about self-care for caregivers. Charlie?
This is what Dorothy Houlihan has to say about nurses' self-care in an article in Voices of Nursing. You can find a link to this in our resource list. Nurses are notoriously bad at self-care. We care for others. That's our passion, our calling, as well as our job. Our own care tends to come in second, or third or fourth, behind all those we care for. Nurses work late, regularly skip lunch, and delay bathroom breaks, all to put their patients first. In the time of COVID, as we face dangerous exposure and worry about our families, self-care can seem egocentric. To some, even the term self-care provokes a sense of unconscious selfishness and resulting guilt. So I was not surprised when I asked a group of frontline nurses what they do for self-care. They laughed in response. Self-care? Are you kidding? We complain a bit and then get back to work. Yet we are getting tired of this pandemic. We've been frightened and may still feel worry daily. Many of us continue to see extremely high levels of suffering and death. And worst of all, patients dying without loved ones at their side. In parts of the country where the crisis is improving, we are still caring for seriously sick people and may still be short-staffed. We feel fatigue on so many levels. Nurses are always reporting that they get inundated with self-help emails, social media suggestions, employee health reach-outs, webinars, and journal articles. The COVID crisis has spawned a new term, resource fatigue. In the midst of this, How do you approach taking care of yourself? How can you actually make time for yourself? Here are ideas provided by frontline nurses to help simplify your thinking. Take 10 minutes to make a list of what might work for you. First, what are the firsts? What has to come first when you get home? Can you find joy in any of these responsibilities? Nurses tell me that walking the dog or bedtime stories can lead to a new sense of appreciation when viewed next to the enormity of what they have witnessed during their shift. Next, what do you love and cherish most? What gives you joy or strength? How can you get more of this? Nurses tell me they have found new appreciation for simple pleasures, like fresh air and sunshine, a hot bath, or a junk romance novel. Take a look at our resource list about how to take a walk. 3. What does your physical body need? Exercise? Better sleep? A haircut? Nurses admit that these are often the needs that go first to conserve energy for the demands of patient care. Making concrete plans might help. Make formal calendar dates for a Zoom exercise class with friends, intimate time, or a YouTube-guided haircut. Meeting basic needs can become special events. 4. Now the hard part, self-reflection and mindfulness. Nurses say they have no time to process during a crisis. That's okay. Do what you can to stay healthy through the worst times. Let off steam in small increments if needed. Can't talk about it? Journal it. The internet has journal guides of every type. Some ideas for journals are in our resource list. 5th, be aware of signs that you need real help. The above suggestions are simple, starter ways to think about self-care. However, be aware of when you are heading for burnout or mental distress. Are you experiencing excessive emotions, fatigue, irritability, sleeping, eating issues, or signs of depression? If so, it is time to reach out to the mental health resources available to you. Talk to a friend, colleague, or supervisor if you are not sure where to start. These are some simple self-care starters. Please share your ideas with us so that we can help each other stay strong. And for everyone listening, thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our executive producer, Major General Retired David Gillette, our producer, Sandy, Tom Hartman, our administrative advisor, and our friends, family, and you, our loyal listeners who are supporting our work at Everyone Dies. This is Charlie Navarrete reminding you what the great Betty Davis once said, old age ain't no place for sissies.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.